Hi guys, my name is Allison Williams. I am the chair of the math department, but I'm also chair of the assessment task force. And it's that reason I'm making this video. I have been trying to reach out to instructors all term regarding course outcome assessment. And I'm creating this video for any instructors who have never done any sort of course outcome assessment before in a class. I want to talk to you about what it is and what we are expecting you to do. Okay, so there is an expectation of what you are going to do, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let's go ahead and talk really briefly about why we're doing this, like why we're bothering. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to bounce back and forth kind of like I would in a class just to talk to you about this. So course outcome assessments here at our college at OCCC. See, so why do we assess outcomes? In their purest form, they help us make certain that we're reaching our goals regarding our students' education in our classes, so in our individual classes that we're teaching, but also in our programs. So when I'm saying programs, that could be like maybe they're literally part of a certificate program like aquarium science, but I could also mean like a department like the math department. So when I have a student who's maybe majoring in mathematics and they go through all of our STEM math courses, there are certain things I want that student to leave our college with, certain skills I'd like them to transfer with. And then there's also our college experience. So at the college, we have these overarching goals we want our students to reach. We call those our four core outcomes. And we've talked about that at a previous in-service. So the four core outcomes are communication, problem solving, cultural awareness, and personal responsibility. So we want our students to have those four ideas fostered in their experience on our campus. We want them to be culturally aware with the classes that they take with us. We want them to be able to communicate clearly and have personal responsibility and problem solving skills. So we have those big overarching goals. Now, for the instructor level, when we're talking about our class, let me go ahead and pause my share here. When we're talking about my class, like let me just use my own class as a specific example. So this term, I'm teaching math for elementary school teachers. And what I'm hoping is that I can give them a really good understanding of the mathematics, like deeper than maybe they've even had before. So since we're talking about the elementary level, I'm talking about like having a deep understanding of what addition means. Like, what does it mean when we're adding two numbers together? Why do we use the techniques we do? So we'll talk about everything from the visualization of that to different techniques to do addition rather than the normal, like what you may have learned in school, which is like the adding by columns and carrying over, right? Like there are other techniques that can be used that are actually really simple that maybe a student might understand better than the old school technique. And we also talk about addition, not just in our number system, which is base 10, but maybe we'll talk about it in a different number system like base 20, which is like what the Mayans use. So the idea is they might actually look at it from a different perspective and maybe get a deeper understanding of how addition works. That way, when they get into their classroom and they're teaching their own students, this not every student learns the same way. So if you're just teaching one technique and one technique only, it's very possible your students aren't going to, all of them aren't going to understand that. Having a deeper understanding is going to allow you to reach every student at a different place. So maybe you go through a different method. Maybe you do something more one-on-one with that student that discusses the concepts. Maybe you do good visualizations because we've talked about it extensively. So you're able to talk about it extensively. That's what I want my students to come out of the class with. All right, so that's the idea. And that is represented in a outcome for the class. So let me go ahead and share my screen with that. So as a department, we have all our course outcomes for our classes. And this is the class I was just talking about, Math 211. And this first outcome right here, apply and understanding of the theoretical foundations of mathematics, focusing on numeration systems and operations as taught at the K through 8 level in order to develop mathematical knowledge and communicating the skills necessary for teaching. So that's exactly what I was just talking about. All right, exactly what I was just talking about. I want my students to understand addition and be able to go into a K through 8 classroom and communicate that very clearly because they have this theoretical foundation in their understanding. Now, you might notice that after the outcome is this thing called PO2. That's referring to the program outcome. So the program outcome for mathematics is here. And this is, we have two for math. We have use appropriate mathematics to solve problems and recognize which mathematic concepts are applicable to a scenario, apply appropriate mathematics and technology in its analysis, and then accurately interpret and validate and communicate the results. So the first one we kind of think of it as like, here's a problem, just solve it. Like we're not really looking at that kind of deeper understanding, where the second one is more about the deeper understanding, looking at a word problem and figuring out what math to use, using technology, interpreting that, communicating that clearly. So that second one is kind of that deeper level. So you'll notice that in the class I was just showing, Math 211, all of them are the second one, PO2, so the program outcome 2, with the exception of number 3 here, where they do talk about using mathematics just to solve some problems. So I included the program outcome 1 as well. Now I'm bringing that up because that is something you are expected to do for your classes. You are expected to line your course outcomes with your program outcomes, but I'm going to save that for another video. So if you're not sure what your program outcomes are, I'll show you where you can find that so that you can line up your outcomes. All right, but before we do that, let's come back into the whole purpose of outcome assessment. So we are looking at it from a class level, a program level, that's the program outcomes, and then the college level, that's the core outcomes. That's coming from the assessment task force. So I reach out to certain classes to discuss the core outcomes, but you personally are responsible for the class outcomes. And inadvertently, because we're tying them to program outcomes, you'll be helping with program outcomes as well, helping, but not doing it. All right, so we need to do this for accreditation. Very important. Colleges need to be doing this overarching ideas, making sure that when a student passes and graduates our college, that they do have these important things that we're asking them to have: cultural awareness. Or for me, one of my elementary math teachers, I want them to have this deep theoretical understanding so that they can go into their classroom and teach that well. All right, so specifically, what are you being expected to do? You are being expected to take anywhere from 1 to 3 outcomes for your class. So you'll notice when I showed you, we had 4 for the class I'm teaching this term. I don't need to do all 4. I need to do either 1 to 3. Now, typically, ideally, it'd be nice if you do 3, okay? More is better. But because this is the end of the term and you and I have not had the chance to meet prior to this moment, you're going to have to at least try 1. All right. Pick 1 outcome that you have some sort of assignment that you can line up with it. So an assignment, I'm meaning like test questions. Like, so for me in my math class, I give a final exam with a bunch of test questions. That is a perfect opportunity for me to measure outcomes. Or maybe you have an essay in your field or a research paper or presentation. Most of us have some sort of final exam that we're asking our students to do here at the end. And therefore, we're going to kind of use it to help us measure 1 or more outcomes. All right. Now, how is that going to work? How are you going to measure it? Well, that's very, up to you. So let me go ahead and give you an example from my perspective. All right. So let me pause here and kind of give you the idea of what I mean by that. So because I'm giving a final exam and I'm talking about having these deep understandings, right? Maybe I'm wanting them to be able to understand addition and subtraction, like they're kind of both together in the same concept, but addition and subtraction, multiplying and dividing. So maybe I have 3 questions on the final exam that covers those topics. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line those 3 questions up with that first outcome I showed you earlier. All right. And if the student gets none of those questions correct, right, they get a 0, then I'm going to label them what I'm going to call emerging. So let me kind of go back into my screen here. So I'm going to label them what I call emerging. They got 0 correct. All right. If they got 1 of those 3 questions correct, then they're a developing student. 2 out of the 3, they're competent. All 3 correct would be proficient. So the idea is I'd like all of my students to have a 3, but I'd accept a 2. A 2 is a good idea, right? Being competent, getting 2 out of the 3, the majority, that's great. So really my goal or hope is that most of my students fall into the area of competent and proficient. And those are the things that we're actually measuring all of our students by. Those words are what we're using. Now, I gave them very specific value based on my assessment of the final exam. I have these 3 questions I'm going to look at, and I kind of measured it like that. But it doesn't have to be that way. If you're doing an essay, maybe you would create a rubric using 0, 1, 2, and 3 for each student as well. All right. The idea that a student is emerging, they're barely getting it or not really getting it at all. Developing, maybe they're somewhat getting it, but they're not there yet. They have a long way to go. Competent, yeah, they're definitely getting it. They're making mistakes, but they're getting the big idea. And then proficient, they're there. They've nailed it. You've got that. However you want to measure it, however it makes sense for your specific assignment, you're going to set up this scale. And then you're going to record that information on the outcome assessment summary form. Now, I'm not going to go through that right now. I'm going to make another video for the people who haven't used the outcome assessment summary form. And then last bit, you're going to take that information and submit it on our JOT form. So I'm going to take a different video to talk about that, the program outcomes, and how to actually submit the information, because some people have done outcome assessment but haven't actually done that specific summary form and JOT form for us, or have lined up their program outcomes. So I'll take a second video for that. But I hope that at least gives you an idea, gets your brain kind of thinking about what you specifically need to do this term. All right. Now, again, if you can only do this for one outcome, whatever, thing you're doing this week for your finals, or if you have work in your possession that you can do this kind of measurement on, some sort of assignment that you've collected previously that you can, I gave them this group presentation. I have all the information on that. And one or two of my outcomes line up with this. Wonderful. You can use that information. But I'm asking that you use something and actually do this kind of measurement on your class, this labeling of emerging, I can't remember the other ones now, proficient, competent, I can't remember the third one, developing, there we go. All right, so I hope that makes sense. And I hope that by kind of talking about it specifically from like what I would do, that gives you an idea of maybe what you could do. It's very dependent on what makes sense for you. And it may not go well. Maybe it doesn't go very well. You try something and it doesn't go well. That's okay. I still want you to go through the process of recording this information, because on the summary form, you have an opportunity to write down, it didn't go well. I'm not going to do this again. I think that next term, I'm going to try this instead. And you'll have an opportunity to talk about what didn't go well and why. All right. But if you do have any questions, any specifics you'd like to ask me, I'll do my best to try to help guide you and give you ideas. I am still willing to meet here as we kind of move into our break. If you do have questions, or you can email me and I'll do my best to try to answer those. But that's it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it helps, and I will talk to you later.